What's going on there, YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, guys, so we are basically going to continue our coverage over the Reign of X era of X-Men comics, where we actually do pick up with Wolverine number 11 and number 12. Now, with that being said, this is basically the two books right here continuing the vampire storyline that we have been covering for a good while in the Wolverine series. Now, with that being said, the plot line does move forward, but we basically see Wolverine turning into a vampire hunter, which honestly is not his first time doing it, but of course it's kind of cool to see him do it once again. Now, with that being said as well, of course, you have to remember that basically right now what's going on across the country, really across the world, is that Dracula is trying to build up his vampire army. Now, with that being said, what he does is that basically, you have Dracula send out small groups of vampires to take out small towns at the night. Of course, at night, that's when vampires can move freely. But on top of that, that is the moment you have most people not on guard because they're asleep, they're watching TV, spending time with their family. They're not really on guard to protect themselves. And so Dracula has been sending out small armies of people, of vampires, to take over small towns across the world, really on the border of Canada and the United States. And so this is Dracula building up his army. On top of that, let's not forget, Dracula also as well made a deal with Omega Red. And that deal is going to be very important for both sides, Wolverine and also Dracula. So here is Wolverine number 11 and number 12. Now, the opening pages of Wolverine number 11 is really Wolverine going around being that vampire hunter. Because like I said earlier, it's Dracula right now sending out small groups of people as a way to take out small towns and turn those small towns of people into vampires, as a way to build up his vampire army. Because more and more vampires you have, that means more groups you can send out to small towns, even big towns, to basically take over to lead a vampire army against regular human beings. Now, with that being said, though, Wolverine caught on a long time ago because, well, actually, he didn't catch on. He was pulled into this hot mess because Dracula wants Wolverine's blood. Now, the reason why they want Wolverine's blood, because if they're able to actually use his blood in a certain way, it will give vampires the ability to actually walk in daylight, the one weakness that's really holding the vampires back. And so if the vampires are actually able to get Wolverine's blood working so that they'll be able to actually walk in daylight, they'll be an unstoppable force. And right now is Wolverine just going to town that he heard about that has been taken over by vampires. Now, that is the moment where we actually do pick up with Omega Red, because like I said earlier, Omega Red is technically working for Dracula, but at the same time it's kind of like a partner for Dracula. Now, with that being said, Omega Red was actually invited onto COPPA before Wolverine had any idea that Omega Red is working for Dracula. Now, Wolverine knows he's working for Dracula. The problem is, though, Wolverine does not have any hard proof to prove that Omega Red is actually working for Dracula. And so Omega Red is still able to live on COPPA. Because remember, when it came to Charles Xavier and COPPA, he said the island is open to all mutants, including characters like Omega Red, who used to be bad guys. But of course, it's Charles Xavier giving bad guys a second chance. But of course, Omega Red is kind of riding that line very close. Now, that is the moment where we actually do pick up with Omega Red right now, actually traveling to go meet up with Dracula. Now, this is actually very important. And the reason why, because when it comes to Omega Red, he was actually killed off by X-Force in an X-Force book we covered a while back. But basically, they did bring him back to life. Now, when it comes to the X-Men, X-Force, X-Factor, whoever, when they die, they can come back to life. Because remember, you have the five. 5 mutants who have the ability to bring someone back to life by making them a new clone body, and then Charles Xavier downloads your memories into that new clone body. Now, of course, you had Omega Red brought back to life, but what they did was they gave him an alternate carbonadium synchronizer. So Omega Red needs that to stay alive. He needs the carbonadium synchronizer to stay alive. Now, with that being said, Dracula gave him one. But of course, with X-Force killing off Omega Red, taking that one out and giving him a new one where they could technically track him and listen into his conversations, he has no idea they basically did that. And so with Omega Red going to meet up with Dracula, they were able to, 1, track him, but 2, hear his conversation with Dracula. Now, the reason why they did that, because when it comes to Dracula, if he was able to actually read the mind of Omega Red, which he can do, he will learn what actually happened to Omega Red, that basically X-Force and of course also Wolverine are on the idea what Dracula wants from Omega Red, which is that Dracula wants Omega Red to keep stealing Wolverine's blood as a way to help them out to get ready to walk in broad daylight. Now, that is the moment where we actually do see Wolverine go to Paris. And the reason why, because he's going to meet up with a particular character that we actually met in the earlier parts of in the Wolverine series. And that character is no other than Luis. Now, remember, Luis is actually part of an order. The order is a bunch of vampire hunters who go around killing off vampires. And right now, their main goal is, of course, to stop Dracula. Now, of course, this is Wolverine coming to Luis to kind of, 1, get some information from her, but 2, also give her some information as well. And 3, because as you can tell, Wolverine does have some feelings towards Luis, and vice versa for her. Now, of course, you do have Wolverine actually take Luis on a walk. And of course, that is the moment where you actually do have Wolverine tell Luis that basically right now, what Dracula is trying to do with Wolverine's blood is use Wolverine's blood as a way to give vampires the ability to actually walk in broad daylight. Now, while you have Wolverine and Luis walking together and kind of bonding with one another, you have Luis basically tell Wolverine that her entire order was taken out. Like, basically, her entire order of vampire hunters are now vampires. And now Luis is also a vampire as well, because they were basically ambushed by one of their own. And of course, everybody was turned to vampires, including Luis. And so when an old lady kind of falls nearby Luis and her hand is bleeding, Luis' vampire side does pop out. Now, Wolverine is able to calm her down and walk her away, but you can tell for Wolverine, he does care for Luis a lot, and he hates to see her like this right now. Now, that is the moment where we actually do pick up in Oxford University, where, of course, we actually do pick up with a guy known as Dr. Boggs. Now, Dr. Boggs is a scientist who works here at Oxford University, and right now you have one of his assistants kind of helping him out, testing some blood samples. Now, of course, these blood samples are Wolverine's blood, but the assistant has no idea. Dr. Boggs does, because Dr. Boggs is working for Dracula. And the reason why, because Dracula basically hired or forced Dr. Boggs to work on mass producing Wolverine's blood, kind of like an antidote mass production need be done. But of course, he has to make sure that when they do mass produce Wolverine's blood as some kind of antidote to let vampires walk in broad daylight, he has to make sure that what he's making actually works. And so Dracula has been going around turning homeless people, drug addicts into vampires, bringing those folks over to Dr. Boggs to test out his Wolverine blood antidote. But of course, they're having a lot of mixed results, meaning that they're kind of close, but at the same time, they're not close in making the perfect antidote with Wolverine's blood to give vampires the ability to walk in broad daylight. Now, getting into the next chapter, of course, we actually do pick up with Wolverine talking to Luis. And of course, it's Wolverine Luis talking about the idea that she's now a vampire, thanks to her order being ambushed by one of their own. Now, with that being said, this is also Luis wanting to die, because she was basically trained to be a vampire hunter. She went out of her way to go out there and kill vampires. And now she's basically is one. Now, this is not her saying like, oh my God, I'm a vampire now. Let me go ahead and be a vampire person. No, she still hates vampires. She wants to hunt them down and kill them all. But of course, now her life has completely changed, because now she is basically a vampire. And that right there is very huge to say. Now, you do have Wolverine being that guy for her, because Wolverine clearly wants to, you know what, her and everything. And so he's like, no, honey, it's okay. Like, you being a vampire is all cool. Everything is a-okay. But that is the moment where they're actually attacked by Father Cole. Of course, another vampire hunter that was actually part of her group. Now, of course, Father Cole is actually here to basically recruit Luis. He's like, listen, I can tell you're fighting against Dracula's control, and that right there is not cool. So I came here to basically force you to kind of help us out. Now, when I say force, he's kind of like, listen, if you do join us and give us Wolverine and his blood, you will basically be rewarded. And so, of course, it is Father Cole trying to convince Luis to actually join the side of Dracula to get that reward. But at the same time, it's still kind of him forcing her to basically help out, because what if that reward is a way for Dracula to turn you back to normal? That's the huge thing right there. Now, of course, after their conversation does go on for a few more pages, you basically have Wolverine kill off Father Cole. So that whole thing right there is done now. Now, of course, we actually do jump back over to Oxford University, where, of course, we actually pick up with Dr. Boggs. Now, remember, Dr. Boggs is right now working for Dracula to basically make some kind of antidote where vampires will be able to actually walk in broad daylight by using Wolverine's blood. Now, with that being said, though, right now you have Dr. Boggs actually being confronted by Omega Red. Now, this is Omega Red basically telling Dr. Boggs that once Dr. Boggs has actually completed the actual antidote, Dracula is going to kill him. And Dr. Boggs already knew that. But this is Dr. Boggs saying the only reason why I'm helping out right now is to save my assistant that basically got turned to a vampire. Once I save him, if Dracula kills me, I wouldn't care. And so you have Omega Red say, listen, I can help you if you help me. And it seems like Omega Red is beginning the process of actually portraying Dracula. Now, this is the moment where we basically find out that Wolverine took Luis back over to COPPA, because of course is Wolverine hoping that possibly somebody on the island could technically help cure her. He's hoping to find a cure for the idea that she has been turned into a vampire. Now, with that being said, of course, nobody could technically help her turn back into a human. But what Forge did for her was he basically made her a suit that kind of helped slow down her need to feed on blood, which is kind of cool because Forge is a cool character sometimes. Now, with that being said, this is also Wolverine and Luis getting some of the weapons they need to kind of help them deal with Dracula and his army of vampires, because this is Wolverine and Luis getting ready to go to war against possibly Dracula or possibly one of his many groups out there in the world. Now, that is the moment you do have Wolverine and Luis get called up by Sage to meet up at the main base for X-Force. Of course, again, X-Force is kind of like the CIA or the Black Ops for COPPA. Now, with that being said, when Wolverine and Luis actually arrive at the main base for X-Force, they are confronted by Omega Red, because this is Omega Red basically telling us, the readers, but also telling Wolverine and X-Force that he wants to help him out to get rid of Dracula. But the problem is, though, Dracula actually owns Omega Red. And what Omega Red means is that because Omega Red has the carbonadium synchronizer that was given to him by Dracula originally, Dracula technically owns Omega Red. But this is Omega Red saying he wants to break free. He does not want to be in control by Dracula. And so this is Omega Red saying, if Dracula wants your blood, Wolverine, let's give him your blood. But of course, let's make it part of our plan to kind of get rid of Dracula. Now, this is the moment where we actually learn what Omega Red meant earlier when it came to the idea of handing Wolverine over to Dracula, because what Omega Red meant was, yes, we are actually going to give Dracula you, but not the real you. We're going to give him the fake you. Because remember, when it comes to COPPA, they actually do have the ability to create clones of you. Because when you die, they want to bring you back to life. Even though they're not actually bringing you back to life, it's still the idea that you're brought back to life with this clone body that's holding all of your memories. And so with that being said, though, right now, it's X-Force in the 5 making a fake clone Wolverine. Not really a fake, but it actually is a clone Wolverine. Except this clone Wolverine can't do much except breathe. And so what Dracula thinks is he has the real Wolverine. And because remember, Dracula and the vampires, they want to use Wolverine's blood as a way to basically give them the ability to walk in broad daylight. But of course, when they begin to use the blood of the fake Wolverine, they kind of find out this fake Wolverine is just a dirty bomb as a way to hurt the vampires and to hopefully get rid of Dracula. And with all the vampires in pain constantly, it gives Wolverine and Omega Red the chance to actually break into the base of Dracula, hoping to kill him and to finally end this vampire war. The problem is, though, you do have Dracula getting away. Now, Dracula does kill off Dr. Boggs because Dr. Boggs did kind of help with the process of making the fake Wolverine be like a dirty bomb with bad blood given to the vampires. But after he did that, Dracula left and he's gone. And so Wolverine's kind of like, okay, we stopped this whole operation for now. But of course, sooner or later, Dracula is going to pick right back up where he left off at. Now, you do have Wolverine and Luis basically go to Otherworld. Now, remember, Otherworld is kind of like this other dimension that is basically connected to every universe in the multiverse and also every dimension in the Marvel landscape. Now, with that being said, you have Wolverine and Luis actually go to one of the kingdoms in Otherworld, and that kingdom is Sevalith. And I really hope I pronounced that correctly. Now, Sevalith, we actually saw a small glimpse of this back in the X of Swords crossover. But basically, it's the home of vampires. Now, this does not mean all vampires in the Marvel landscape came here. It's just that in this kingdom, you do have vampires. Now, there's a huge reason why I'm bringing this up, because what Wolverine is saying is that basically when it comes to vampires on Earth, that was all started by Dracula. That's just one race that was basically started by Dracula. This race right here in Sevalith, no. This race right here is completely different because they treat each other like royalty. On top of that, their hunger for blood is more control than Dracula and all his vampires. And even on top of that right there, their idea of making more vampires, they found a way to make children using their own blood. And so they're not going around turning people into vampires. They're just making vampires. They're more calm and better nature vampires. And so this is Wolverine hoping if him and Luis actually go to these vampires right here and tell them about Dracula, they could possibly help him, Luis, get rid of Dracula. It's basically leading up to a huge vampire war. But of course, at the end of this, we kind of find out, and we kind of forgot about this kingdom is being ruled by one of the children of Apocalypse, one of the original horsemen, and that is Death himself. And so with Wolverine saying, hey, we want to kill Dracula, Death and these vampires are the perfect allies to help Wolverine actually accomplish that goal. And with that being said, this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. Also, if you have any suggestions on books I should read, well, please let me know in the comments below, because you never know, your suggestion could be a future video down the road. But guys, I'll see y'all next time. Later.